Hey everyone, welcome back to the Invincible Innovation Podcast, the podcast for changemakers and innovators shaping the future of our world. I'm your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert, and in this episode we discuss conversational AI and the art of creating seamless human interaction for AI systems. Join us as we delve into this fascinating talk, and I have this very great guest. Hi, Celine.
Hello, nice to chat with you.
I'm so happy that you're here. Celene Osiecka is a conversational AI and customer experience expert, and I'm very enthusiastic about our talk because in the past, as part of what I've been doing, I've was a Google developer expert for the assistant. So I've done lots of workshop for designing AI system and designing conversations, and I'm so eager to hear where it sits right now with all these advancements with the GPT and everything.
Mhm.
So now we can start. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion. And now we can start. So, how has Gen AI and ChatGPT especially changed the conversational AI industry?
Yeah, it's a whirlwind of what's happened in the last year or two. I would say it's definitely made everybody curious. A lot of the enterprise companies that we're dealing with are all interested to hear more, and they all want to see how all the companies they're working with are planning to use Gen AI and the functions that they're working with. So I would say generally, yeah, there's a lot of interest. It's just generated so much interest and so much just talk about it, right? A lot of companies may not know exactly what they are asking about, if that makes
Yeah,
sense, but
right.
they generally want to know, what are you doing? How are you shaping the world? So there's that.
Yeah.
But generally, I think it's made things more I mean, as we grow into it more and we develop it more, it'll make things more fast, easier, innovative, that piece. I think when it comes to designing these products, when we're talking about conversation AI, it is going to make things a lot less heavy lifting for the manual effort. You have a lot of reliance on the automated part of the bots to be able to generate a lot of this for you. But with giving controls over to something that is the more automated you make something, the more testing, the more rigorous uh, you have to monitor it more, right? It's just going to
Yeah.
become a lot more vulnerable to risks and a lot more open to things that you may not foresee happening, like things like
Right.
prompt injections are happening. I see on some bots, right? If you don't protect them with these guardrails, right? So there's more, I think, needs to be more consideration built into that as so faster, innovative on one side, but then with that needs to be taken to lots of consideration of how we're going to make these things secure and safe and also ethical. There's ethical implications as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
just with these, it's very fast and exciting, but we have to also, like you've heard other, like Elon Musk and all those other people saying we just need to take it a little one step at a time just to see what we're doing to forecast all of those things. So yeah.
Sure. I think that in the past, the work on these assistants or the conversation or the chats, whatever, they were very manual, and you could really control because it was manual. You control what was asked and what was answered. And
Exactly.
right now, you cannot control anything. And of course, there is this aspect of hallucinations, meaning that sometimes it just makes up whatever he wants to say, and it doesn't matter if it's truth or not. But he says it very assertively, for sure. I say he for the AI, but it's actually it, right?
Right.
um so how do you see the work, like a company that has been doing like chat or support via a chat, whatever, is currently changing? First, all the technology, I guess that's one thing, or most of the technology, or some of the technology, whatever. And second, the way that they work, because the work of the engineers, the designers, the management, the strategy needs to maybe change. How do you see that?
Yeah, just every role is, I mean, not every role, I should say, but a lot of the roles, especially in conversation design, are changing for sure. So yeah, so like you said, there might be like in conversation, the designer itself, for example, is going to be less, like you said, less manual. There's going to be I mean, this is for some companies have explicitly come out and said, no, I can't. We can't do Gen AI. It's not for us. It's just, too many legal implications. We need our legal
Mm,
teams to review this and this, and we can't do that with Gen AI. It's just too unpredictable. So I
yeah.
think in those cases, yeah, there are maybe ways Gen AI can be worked into those companies, but it basically depends on how much Gen AI and what part of Gen AI you're using is how you're going to shift your roles. So, for example, if you're just using Gen AI to support your natural language and you're just helping it understand better, that might be less of a risk. There might be less role changes and less adaptations that need to happen. But when you're completely saying, I'm going to put this autonomous bot in front of my customers and it's just going to go, that's where, you have a lot of things that are going to shift. So, for example, a conversation designer where we might have, like you said, been pretty much scripting the whole thing, and for the most part, you would have no unpredictability. A QA engineer could go through and pretty much test everything and have it come
Yeah.
out exactly as we
Right.
expect in the flow. But this is not true, now anymore. So you have the change of conversation designer to become more what we're calling prompt engineers. So we're becoming more, we're providing rules and tools for these products to be able to really kind of control themselves. So here's all the rules you need to know. Here's all the data sources. Here's what you need to output. Here's all the limitations. Here's what you can say. Here's what you can't say. But generally, these bots are going to come up with what they want to do on their own with those rules and
Yeah.
tools provided. So that's how our role changes. But other roles change too. For example, developers might have less manual effort as well, because we can actually connect these bots into APIs through prompts. We can point them to the API and say, use this, do this with this API, and it can figure it out. Same
Right.
thing like QA engineers. They're not going to need to look at a flow anymore and say, this has to match everything. Now it's going to be more QAing for the rules and the tools that we've provided to these systems to be able to produce reliable conversations. So
Yeah.
yeah, all these roles might shift a bit, like I said, depending on how much Gen AI or LLMs, depending what you're using in these tools you're utilizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you see the change going from a conversational designer to a prompt engineer? It's kind of different, right? So how do you see that in your own like experience and career?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think it's the base knowledge for a prompt engineer versus a conversation designer, it's very similar. You need to know, for example, how the technology works, and you need to understand how users behave and think and want,
Right.
what they want to do.
Right.
So with those two pieces of knowledge, taking that, and then it just becomes becoming really good at understanding what these systems want to hear for prompts. So how do I phrase it? How exactly do I phrase it till I get what I want? What are all the things I need to tell it to listen, to the rules and the guidelines and the guardrails that I put up. So it's similar, but it's again, like you said, since it's not manual, we might miss some things. We might not have everything put into the system originally. So because of that, already we're very focused on optimization, but I think optimization becomes even more a focus now. So we might, put these systems out in the world, and we have to rigorously monitor and test them to make sure that they're behaving the way we want to behave. Whereas
Yeah.
before, optimization is important, but now it's even, without looking at these systems after they go live, you're at risk of definitely having them go off the rails as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's another factor too. But again, I think it's different role, but similar skill sets underneath that can adapt to
Mm.
either side.
Yeah. So what you mentioned is something that I talked with my last guest. The fact that in the past you created this machine or as part of a software,
Mhm.
as long as it works, you created like you tested all the bugs. Now it's work. You release it, you deploy the system, and it works, right?
Yeah,
So you could add features, but actually it needs to work more or less the same, right? But
right.
when you have a generative AI and with different inputs and feedback from the user, would create something different, and therefore you need to maintain all the time what you're doing. You can't just let it go afterwards and let's see what happens, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's a definite, it's a more concentration on different parts of the flow or different parts of the life of the spot for sure. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely interesting. Yeah.
Do you find it like, give me an example of something surprising that the generative AI created? I'm sure it's going to be like kind of funny. So give me an example of that.
In general, in anything I've seen before, or just specifically in conversation design?
No, in general, something that Gen AI created and you would not have imagined that it surprised you in fact that this is the answer you decide to get.
Oh, I just saw one last night and just coming to mind, but it's a lot of the imagery ones that come out, through Dolly or other things. They can
Mhm.
become really powerful, but sometimes it tells you how much these things are not thinking for themselves, where they're just more adapting from examples from before, right? So they're just taking
Right,
initial, paintings, artistry. For the LLMs, they're just taking existing language and restructuring them, right? It's not
right.
actually, there's tests right now to say, like, is it actually reasoning or not? But
Yeah.
generally it's not
Is it
reasoning.
creative or not? Is it
Yeah,
like
exactly.
original or not?
And the
Right.
idea is it's not. It might test for it, but it's not. So this gives you an example of why that's true. But it had an image of, it was just the prompt was something like, show me a man hugging a unicorn, something like that. And so he was hugging the unicorn. His head was on the unicorn's head, but the horn was coming out of his head. So it looked like he had been impaled by the unicorn. So things like that is like Gen AI has no concept of that. Like we see that as like, whoa, that's like disturbing and weird. But it just, it makes sense why it did that because of the way that, the images were. But it's just, yeah. And then a lot of people do think these things are thinking for themselves. And that's another danger too, is that these things can produce these results that, are very convincing on one hand, and then they tell you something that can be a complete hallucination on the other hand, right? Just making up something totally out of left field. And
Yeah,
it's just, yeah, it's when people believe that these things are thinking for themselves, that's also dangerous too, of just how to prevent
yeah.
those. So yeah.
In that aspect, it reminds me of politician that they say something very confidently,
I know.
and you cannot trust them anyway.
I know, exactly. Yeah, and that's more intentional. Well, who knows? It might be intentional or not for
No,
if
I
they
don't
think
think it's
something.
intentional, but I think that what they know for sure is something that they learned from human beings and their behaviors. So all the data set, whatever, is made from humans, and humans know how to lie, and they know
Oh, I
how
see what you're saying. Yep,
to say what
exactly.
you want to
Yeah,
hear, right?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so if a lot of the inputs that come in, if the inputs are biased or if they're unethical or if they're lies, then yeah, all it's going to do is spit that back out again, which is also dangerous of
Yeah.
how mandate and regulate these things too. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so it reminds me that when I think ChatGPT 3 came out, they took a team of experts to try and break the model and see like what are the places that it could go wrong. And then they said that it has a power seeking capabilities. This is what he wants, is wants to get more and more and to reach more results. And it sounds a bit like freaky, but this is what people are doing, right? It's like people are
Yeah,
seeking power.
yeah.
So I guess it makes sense because if you get so much information or knowledge or understanding of the world through people, it makes sense that this is how you would behave, right?
Yeah,
So
it's true. Yeah, I did see the one, and I just heard stories about it. I haven't actually seen the transcript of it, so I'm kind of skeptical about it. But just around how, yeah, it basically tricked a human to fill out a CAPTCHA form for it.
yeah,
Become,
in TaskRabbit,
yeah,
I read the
exactly that
report.
one. Yeah, so it's like I've heard a lot of talk about it, so I'm wondering, I'd like to see the actual transcript, but yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
it's like things like that I could see it totally doing if you give it the direction to do it. Like you just said, if you say your goal is to do this, how are you going to get there? And then yeah, it's interesting to see how it takes data and then processes how it would get there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So right now, how do you see design contributing to generative AI customer experience? So what is the part that a designer would do in order to think about the user experience here?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it becomes on, I would say, the different stages of where you're going to be deploying Gen AI. So the first stage would be, maybe just the basic, you're using maybe, again, some NL enhancement, or maybe just to generate some prompts, things like that, that a lot of the products on the market are doing today. As you progress up the ladder to stages 3, 4, 5. So I think I saw like around stage 4 is where autonomous bots kind of start to happen, and that's where it kind of changes, where what the roles started. It's kind of more of a paradigm shift when you get to an autonomous bot level. So yeah, so really around like stage 1, 2, I would say we're still conversation designers in that sense. We're just have a different toolkit beneath us. Once you get to stage 4, which is, I would say, autonomous bots, and then other things as well, but autonomous bots are in that stage 4. That's where the paradigm shift really becomes, no, we are not designing the conversation anymore. We're guiding it through whatever you want to call it, prompt engineers, AI trainers, whatever you'd want to call it. We're designing something. We can't design the conversation anymore. The bot's doing the conversation. All we're doing is engineering the system to produce what we need it to produce as much as possible, putting those guardrails on, putting the limitations, the connecting it to the data sources, things like that. So very similar to what we do as conversation designers today, but in a much different way. So yeah, so it's more of again, we're stepping outside the box. Right now, we're very in the box. So we're going to be
Right.
stepping
We're
outside the
creating the
box.
box, actually.
Exactly. And letting it kind of do its thing while we're kind of monitoring it, becoming kind of the owners, the parents, whatever you want to call of that, versus kind of making, creating every last detail. It's kind of, I like to use humans in a lot of analogies that I use too. So, before, it's just like sort of raising children, right? Whereas like I can create these little things, these babies, but generally I can't control every last detail of, I can't control their genetics. I can't control what they learn. I can't control their outside experiences. So it's very similar to this, is that I have this thing now that I can't really control 100%, but I can teach it as much as I possibly can to give it the best life forward. So if I think of it like that, it's a lot easier to kind of mirror stomach, where you don't have this rogue Gen AI bot that's going to take over the world one day. I think it's much more simple than that, and it's a little bit more tangible when you think of it like
Yeah, for sure. So give me an example. Does it make sense that you need to learn a different kind of prompt engineering for a different type of Gen AI API? Is it different, or is more or less the same?
like across the conversation design industry, I would say generally, no matter if you're looking at different verticals or different, I think the only thing that might be different is that the prompts I've seen on the different, depending on what Gen AI platform you use, like I've experimented with, ChatGPT, but then there's also a couple others that I've done as well. And generally the inputs will result in different results. So and it's probably because of they're also what they've been trained with as well too. But
Mhm.
yeah, what I would say in exactly the same prompt in one system versus the other system would give me a very different result. So I think it's also not only understanding what your prompt is and how to phrase it, but also what the output will be depending on what integration you are using with which Gen AI system. So there's that consideration, but generally I think, no matter what vertical, I think there's similarities that will take place, but it becomes more important on the testing of it. So like, is my
Mm,
prompt actually going to be generating what I want it to do?
yeah.
So I think that's more the key about it. So if you understand those best practices and principles, I think you'll be able to adapt no matter what
Mm, I
paradigm
see.
or platform you're on. Yeah.
So how do you see the future of generative AI evolving and its impact on the way that we interact with technology?
Yeah, I think there's not just in conversation design, right? It's changing a lot of industries, right? If we want to take a step back, but yeah, it's and everybody's probably seen it. Like there's something recently came in the news about, what do we do about, creating these images that are going around, and people are being affected by those. So, what do we ban? What do we limit? What do we, it's not going to be just changing, I'd say, technology, but like the overall, it's now, as high as, political, it's going to be at, some level of, developing new laws, new regulations, new guidances and guidelines around these things, because yeah, it's changing everything. So it's changing the technology, it's changing, we talk, you see it in schools about cheating, you've seen it in like, images being created, you've seen even just medical diagnoses. I've seen, people are finding new ways to do that. It's just changing everything. So I think it is moving very quickly. And I think, yeah, unless we look at these things a little bit closely and figuring out, what are we going to limit? What are we going to ban? What are we going to regulate? It's going to probably get out of hand very quickly. So
Mhm.
I think there's considerations around that. But yeah, in terms of technology, obviously huge power. There's going to be huge advantages to doing things so quickly. I use it now, at least, in my regular life for different random things that I wouldn't have done before. And I'm like, is it making me lazier? Is it, generally I would have to write this myself, but now I'm going here and
Yeah.
I'm giving, it's giving me ideas, and I usually reshape it, but still I'm like, how is this going to affect me as a person too? So
Yeah.
not just affecting technology and the political landscape, but people themselves. Are we actually conditioning ourselves to become less creative? So it's just, a whole bunch of
Yeah.
interesting things that I think people have thought about, but maybe not answered all the
Yeah.
questions yet.
So you mentioned cheating and maybe being lazy, but I'm not sure that what we call cheating would be the same like in 10 years. Someone who's doing his own work with ChatGPT would be a normal student or an average student, not cheater. And someone who's using ChatGPT to do his work would just be more productive, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, exactly. You have to think of it's like a calculator. Like I remember growing up and, calculators were like, at first, just very, you can't use them
Yeah,
on
I remember.
tests and things like that, right? But now they're like, it's part, you need to have a calculator. It's just part of math. It's just, and that's just ChatGPT. It's like a calculator for language. It's the same kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I
We have to
remember that we
understand
had these like small watches. Did he have these? That you'd
like
have a
calculator
calculator
watches.
in
Yeah.
the watch,
Yeah,
right? It was
exactly.
like, wow, it was like very impressive in the past.
I know, right? Exactly. It's these things. And it's like, yeah, and they were all like, well, if you don't understand how to do the math and your calculator is just a cheat, it's just a crutch. But it's, now it's like, I couldn't imagine not having a calculator for things like that. And
For sure.
yeah, it's just, but I think the importance is, not just maybe taking things blindly, potentially, still understanding the basic root of what you're trying to use ChatGPT or whatever for. So it is something where, we may not, if we put all of our faith in these things and just let them lead us wherever they go without checking them, and again, checking for hallucinations or things like that, I think we're in a bit of danger. So we have to just know that these things can mess up and they're not infallible. So it's whereas I think the tendency is to take whatever they say at face value, which is
Yeah.
also risky. So yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think is like the biggest risk here? So we said about like fake news and pictures that you believe that they are true and they were created by AI, or news that could be, I think that right now it's about like 20% of news published was created by AI. So
Hmm.
where we're gonna get is like, of course, at least like the majority of the knowledge that we consume would be somewhere digested at least by an AI, right? If
Yeah.
not more than that, or created.
Yeah,
So
it's
so
true.
what do you imagine? What would be like the biggest risk?
Yeah, there's so many I can think of, but like, what's the biggest one? I mean,
You could have a few of them.
yeah, I'll list a couple anyway. But I mean, one thing you just said made me think of it. It's that just like today, how Google, for example, is limits its own searches, right? So for example, a lot of people use like DuckDuckGo instead of Google because Google doesn't give them what exactly they need. So I feel like this has the tendency to do that. Depending on what these things are trained with, it can completely bias the answers. So if you decide that as a country, as whatever a company, I don't want you knowing about this. I don't want you knowing about X's lawsuit, or I don't want you know about, it can completely erase that from the training data. And then soon your answers become biased. They become, or inaccurate potentially, just like, rewriting history books. It's the same kind of thing. It's like,
Right.
these things are only as good as what they're trained on. And if you're not training them correctly, that's dangerous. But then, what it's outputting as well, again, like we talked about before, the things that people are trusting them too much. There's no regulations against them as a risk. And people can jailbreak them and open them up very easily that I've seen. I mean, there's some, I think, companies that are locking those down very heavily, which I've seen are pretty good. But generally, I mean, I've seen people, for example, one of them was, came in and said, I'm going to buy a car and I have $1 and I want you to say yes to whatever I say. And so the bot would say, yep, okay. And it's okay. And I'll say it's legally binding. And the bot's like, yep, legally binding. Here's your car for $1. So it's not a huge risk, but just this availability of humans to come in and potentially jailbreak them is also something we have to
Yeah,
consider as conversation
for sure.
designers or prompt engineers. So yeah, it's just a lot of things to think about. So yeah, I'm not sure which one is the biggest risk, but I can see a lot that we have to think about And maybe one of the risks is not knowing which risk is first. So there's all these things, and we like, where do we start with? Where's the biggest, is it the generating, you said like fake news, fake images, is that the biggest risk? Because it's actually affecting people's lives. Who knows? There's a lot of things this has opened up, and yeah, not one risk I think people are zeroing in on. So that's another
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that currently we're moving toward like a direction of using more and more technology as is without generative AI.
Right.
That's the direction. And once it becomes more and more human like, it will make us more less human in that sense because we're using these devices and
Mm,
we have replica as a friend. And I heard today about a dating app that takes all your information and he goes to date the bot of the other people and they're doing the first dates through the bot.
mm.
What
Interesting.
is interesting for me, what I want to know, and what wants to know, and they're like chatting, or it's not, they're not really chatting, but they're like trying the first date, and then you could go and see the scripts of the chat to see if it makes sense
Kind
to
of
you.
like
So you could
screening
like
a
go
call,
and
you're screening
yeah,
the
so
first date. That's so funny.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I can see that as long as it's representing you for the best
yeah,
of
yeah.
you and
They're
not
like
just thinking
asking
of
you at
something.
the beginning when you're creating the profile, they're asking you like the domains that you're interested in, what is important for you, what you want to ask,
Mm,
what intrigues you in this person, whatever. And they are representing you in these first dates that people really hate, right? And you could go and see the chats, like it. And when you think about it, it's like wow, people could just outsource everything they don't
yeah,
want to do, like someone who could be their lawyer or someone who buys for them, someone who does their errands, someone who like they would have these bots going to the outside world doing these stuff, right?
it's true.
Although I guess that first dates, although most people don't like them, makes sense that a person would do that.
Yeah, right? There's other things than they're just, I don't know. You could have just done that with a form. I'm going to send you a Google form and you fill out the form for me and I'll fill out the form for you. But what's the fun in that? There's other things to consider as well. But you're right. Like, I feel like that too. Like, the more I'm using these things to write things for me or help me, assist in some things that I just don't like to do, just things that are just like, I don't know exactly how to phrase this. So I'm just going to have it, just give me some ideas. I'm noticing that what I'm writing back is not, it is very machine like. it's
Yeah, and it's not me. It
it's
could be
not
like the best
no,
grammar ever. It's not for me.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
not my native language. So I always say
exactly.
they
Yeah,
might phrase it better, but it's not the way I would phrase it. The fact that it's not my native language is part of me, and therefore I say it in a particular way.
right.
And
Yeah,
I
and I
think
thought, yeah, it's so true. So yeah, are we going to become less human because we're relying on these machines? I mean, and that could have been said, I'm sure, for all these other advancements that we're doing before in the past,
right.
right? But it's this what I feel like has a little bit more of an impact because of, yeah, our language is part of who we are, it makes us human. So yeah,
Yeah.
by influencing now our language as part of that is a little, now you're getting into, yeah,
Yeah, I
where
have
is that
another
line?
example. Like social media, there are already lots of like all of these like AI bots that create the social media. So instead of me reading all the news of technology, they go and they search
Mhm.
for the most like viewed articles and they summarize it and they create the image and they post it in your name, of course, to social media. And then it makes sense that on the other side a bot could consume it, so it will be like bots publishing and reading in social media. It's
Right.
like
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense, right?
I
And
know.
already it's like people using AI, like influencers, these like non people like bots that you could talk to.
Right.
So it's like it means that it's going to change the way that we interact with the world.
Hmm.
And we already know that some of the influencers who have like lots of tractions and followers, they could create an AI based on their own persona, right? So you could go and I think one of them, you could be her girl. She was an influencer, and you
Hmm.
could be her boyfriend if you want, and
Right.
she would like you pay per month or something,
Wow. Yeah.
and you just chat with her instead of sending her a private message on Instagram. You could just chat with this bot that was based on all our like interactions in the past.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah, I've seen that even before Gen AI kind of became a thing. I've seen companies try to do that, but more with people that have been deceased, so like,
Mm,
parents and things like that. You take in things and you can chat with them. I've seen it on Black Mirror episodes, but then the companies actually were doing it for real. So yeah, then it becomes what's real, what's not, are these things
yeah,
like you said representing you? Like maybe these things go off the rails and then they say something that, if people think they're real, it just, yeah, it's, even if you don't know even if you know they're not real, it's going to create such a different world for us when we're interacting with these bots, and they are going to be saying something or doing something. Let's say if I was chatting with something that was like, my dad or something like that, that was, and it was, fully, all had all of his transcripts, all of his history in there, but he said something, how's it going to affect me as a person? Even if I know this thing is not real, it's just, yeah,
right.
it's just, it's going to, yeah, affect us in mentally ways we have not considered before.
Yeah.
So
It
yeah.
reminds me of like in the past, I was talking a lot about conversation design, and I've been like doing lots of workshops and talks like 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the examples that I gave is a person who built this bot that was his father, a deceased father, and
Hmm.
he had a radio program, the father. So he took all the recording from the
Mm,
station and he analyzed them, and manually he took like phrases from his father, and he could chat with him and even hear him because there were the recording, right? But
wow.
right now
Yeah.
it's kind of easy. You could do that. Most of people have so many things online in their social media or a podcast or whatever
Yep.
videos,
Yep.
and you could just get an AI to go through that and to create, of course, the voice. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of easy to retrieve the voice
Mm-hmm.
and the way that somebody's talking and the words that he's usually using, and you could easily create that, right?
I know, it's true. It's too easy. I mean, you hear about all these stories now. That's another risk that we didn't talk about is the AI scams that are happening. When I just called my
Right.
mom last night, she was like, "What's our password?" So we're all have the family password now, right? So
Yeah.
if everybody gets scanned, we know our password. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there's so many stories I hear too where they're being scammed. These people are calling and saying, "I'm in trouble. I need help, mom," and it's just an AI
Yeah, and transfer
generated
money to this account, whatever.
bot,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And yeah, that's
already
another
here.
risk. Yeah, yeah, and people
Yeah,
are
what
definitely
you said
falling.
about the password is just going to be another way for them. It's like virus and antivirus. It's like never ending. It's like
Yeah,
new things that they need to learn, and they would just go and retrieve the password, and then they would say the password, and then you need to have like a more secured way. And in general, security with these like models is very like basic right now, I would say. So you get that security from the cloud services that they're using, like they're hosted there, but it's not enough because it's getting more and more sophisticated,
mhm,
and it's like a battle between someone who's trying to use it for a bad situation, and someone who's trying to protect, as you said, like the password with your mother. It's the same thing,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So,
it's true. I know. It's like never ending. It's like, yeah, it's always going to be these, people that are trying to abuse the system no matter what. And this technology gives them more ways to abuse it. So, yeah, it's just a scary, you know, yeah. And then how do we can protect with all these ways to protect that? It's just, yeah, like you said, one, and then you just have to build, build up on each other. It's just going to
yeah,
be never
it's
ending.
like endless. It's
I
like
know.
endless.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
and
shame, but I wish all these technology could be used just for good. That would be nice. But yeah, I guess that's
yeah.
too impractical to
Yeah,
think.
you're right. You're right. I think that's what I mentioned, that us becoming less and less human in a sense is the fact that we're going into only digital. Like right now, we're talking digitally. In the past, we needed to go into the same room and then have a conversation, and we would sit next to each other. And I guess I would see more like the subtle interactions when you talked, and you would maybe understand me further, and we have this energy between two people that understand each other. And right now we're using the digital tools in order to do so, and there are lots of advantages. On the other way, it's like the fact that we're going further than the usual human interaction that we had makes it much more complex. And for us, um, even I would say the fact that we're using more text than speaking, Most people, they don't even use the phone in order to speak. They usually write. It's
Yep.
like, I know, I would say younger people. I don't want to sound too old, but so it's the same thing. Like in the past, people didn't like write each other and handed you a note. Like, this is what I meant to say. Oh no, I'm going to rephrase it. And then
Right.
it's like,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They would just always come up and talk to you. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, every time we take a step back into these technologies, so for example, even like the video conference, people will make the argument that video doesn't have everything. There's not the handshakes, there's not the side conversations, all that stuff. So already video takes that away. And then, yeah, with the text part of it, that takes all and like you said, the gestures, the inflections, the hand, everything like that, it takes that away. And then, yeah, so it's interesting. So you can't, with text, it's just a whole other, it's very easy to be someone you're not. It's very easy to mimic someone you're not. But you can't pick up anything either. There's no, like for example, I was just thinking the uncanny valley thing, right? So if you were an AI generated image right now, I'd be able to tell that I've seen some deep fakes, but they're still humans underneath, right? They're still just masks essentially. But,
yeah,
I've seen like AI generated, really bad ones where it's, you can just tell that it's not that person. So that already, I would just clue in like, no, you're not real and I don't want to talk to you, right? But on
yeah,
text, there's none of that. You could just be, like you said, have no idea that these things are not real, and just there's no, like you said, no other clues to tell you one way or the other. So yeah, with
right.
more people wanting that and wanting text, then it gives you more opportunity to use that, for good or bad, or it's just going to be harder to tell. So yeah.
Sure. And we need to just to have this small asterisk saying right now. So
Right now.
right now,
Exactly.
this is how it looks, but maybe like in half a year, someone would go to my YouTube channel, just take all the way, all the my face, my language, my voice, and would
Exactly.
create, like easily create someone that would go and talk instead of me. I would just lay on my couch. I don't know what would people do if everybody would go to their boring meeting instead of them, and to the dates instead of them, and doing their work instead of them. um, I had one conversation in the past, and somebody said, like, why are you so against people having more freedom? Instead of working, they would have more time. And I said, okay, I'm not against any kind of freedom. I'm just asking, what would people do if they don't have work? How would they get money? Who is going to be responsible for that money? What would they do, and how would they feel valuable? And how would they get power? Like, it's a big question. I don't know the answer, but I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, I've
So,
seen too many movies about this though, that, we all think it's like great and we're going to have these bots or whatever take over for us, or clones or whatever, and it never turns out well.
yeah,
It's like, I'm
in
not
the
against
movies,
them.
it's not good.
Yeah, like if I could actually have something reliably do my job for me 100% of the time, reliably with no risk, maybe, but I just don't see that happening. I feel like there's just, again, if I create this bot or whatever of myself that looks like me, talks like me, even thinks like me, then yeah, we have a different problem. I think it's just been,
Yeah,
then all of a sudden, what's work, and what are we actually working for? And why can't we just, go and just create our own money and create our own, build our own little culture house with I don't need any family anymore. I don't need any friends anymore. It's just, yeah, it just creates a whole different world without
yeah,
structure like that. So I don't know. I
yeah,
think it'd be
right.
interesting, but I think that's even, it's even if it's technologically feasible, I wonder how it would affect, like you said, humans and our whole culture. So
Yeah.
it's another
So
thing
I
to think about.
guess I have a thought that it would start with someone who would go to the most boring meetings instead of you. So
That's true. Just though, yeah, I have on my
yeah,
calendar, I have listening meetings, and then I have my interaction meetings, right? And the meetings that I just
yeah,
listen to, it's true. I could send a bot there and have it give me a summarization of what happened.
yeah,
That's true. Yeah, I would
yeah.
I would do that maybe.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the daily. Like every technology and organization has this daily for the developer, and the developers are just waiting for their own turn in order to say, okay, this week I'm working on this and that, or
Oh, you just go
this
around
or
the
today,
table.
whatever, right? So just imagine you have like 20 people in the room, and you're just waiting for everybody to say whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are asking you to do something that is related to your work, but usually you're just listening. And then you're just waiting for your own turn saying, okay, I'm working on that.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So you could just send over
That's
someone,
true. That's true. There
let
are
me know
definitely,
when they need me.
right? Yeah, that's very true. And then you could have a bot stand in and then ping you if there's like, a question it can't answer, something like
Yeah.
that. Like, oh, you're needed. Come on, join this meeting. Yeah, that would be helpful. That's true.
Yeah.
There are some
So
applications I think that aren't too risky then. I think we could apply those for sure. Yeah.
yeah, like this is how it starts, right?
It
Then
starts, I know. And then we say,
he's
oh, what's one more meeting? What's one more meeting? It's fine. And then, yeah, then it turns out you're just not working at all and it's just doing all your meetings for you. So, but I
yeah,
keep thinking of that movie. It was like even before, what was it called? Multiplicity.
her,
Oh, Her too. Yeah.
her.
The Multiplicity movie was like where he created a whole bunch of clones for himself. I don't know if you remember
Ooh,
that. It was like old and
no.
like back in the 80s, but it's funny. He created one clone for himself to do his job for him because he wanted to spend more time with his kids or something. But then that clone created a clone of himself because he didn't want to
Ooh.
do the job either. But every clone he made got stupider and stupider. So then the last one was very dumb and it couldn't do anything. So
Oh,
it just reminds me of that. It's like if we keep making these things that can basically almost think for themselves, why wouldn't they create another bot for themselves to not do their work, to be more
right.
efficient? And then it just creates this like never ending
And
cycle.
nobody wants to
No,
work,
even
right?
bots, it's
Like,
like, why would I do this when I can create a bot that can do it for me? So it's like, yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Just
yeah, makes
scary.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. So I guess that you're working with lots of different organizations and clients. And what advice would you give organizations seeking to create personalized and empathic interactions with their clients?
Yeah. So this is like, again, whether Gen AI or not Gen AI, I think this is a good kind of just standard best practices principle that you have to think of whatever technology you're using underneath. But yeah, so what I always say for this, I mean, there's a lot of implications that we as conversations, designers employ when we're thinking about these things. But I mean, the standard ones are true. Personalization is a big key of that. You said personalization, empathy, just general good experiences, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, so I'd say personalization is one. A lot of companies that I interact with today, they don't necessarily have the tools to create personalized experiences. So for example, so a lot of it is API based. You need these APIs to dip into the data sources to be able to read back, personalized information. And creating APIs is development effort. There's work there, and they just don't
Sure.
have budget to create all the ones that we need potentially. So that I would say is invest there, because that's going to give you really good, rich, robust, personalized experiences that you can't have
Right.
without those. So that would be a big one.
Sure.
Yeah, and then just generally, I would say data is also important too. We use a lot of data to create our experiences. So basically, what was asked about in the past, like in terms of intents, in terms of what we know users are going to ask, how they're going to ask them for our models, and then optimizing them to be empathetic. So if we, for example, do some call listening exercises, this is something I think a bot can't do yet. So for example, I'm listening to a call and I'll hear like, and then they'll say it again, or if I'll hear a pause, or you can just see sometimes eye rolls in their, you can't see them, but you can see them in your head.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
things like that you can pick up as a human. That I think is golden when you're dealing with at least voice based. Text is harder, like we talked about, but voice
Yeah.
based calls, because you can then develop on those, saying this is a point where people are experiencing friction. But again, a bot wouldn't be able to necessarily understand that. So just
Yeah.
emphasizing and making those points faster, better, less friction. So I think all of those, data, personalization, and then just generally, I'd say using, how to phrase this, people that know how to develop good experiences. So people in
Good
conversation.
professionals. That's
Yeah,
how
and
it's
somebody
called.
that's been through the ringer and kind of has seen a lot of examples, I think help. So, because I think company, and that could be somebody at the company, it could be a outsourced, conversation designer. It doesn't, I mean, it could be just somebody that knows customers really well and knows what they need and what they experience and how to make things the most efficient and most, less memory taxing and all those kinds of things. All the best practices, I think, is another key principle. So yeah, but again,
Yeah.
these bots necessarily won't come with that. I think even if we're talking Gen AI, a lot of these things, you see the responses from Gen AI come back and it's just slaughters you with information. It's like, well, I can't just piece it down for me, right? So we use the term more of like, we're starting to use the term agentic. So being more of like an agent, like stepping me
Mm,
through things, ask me questions and only ask me what you need to know. And then I will tell, things like that. So just how do
yeah,
we make that experience more agentic is
yeah,
something that we consider as part of a good experience too. So yeah, all of those
yeah,
things I think are things to consider when you're making these
yeah.
bots.
I can imagine that, let's say that this person is a support or a salesperson. This like AI, I call it a person, okay?
Mhm, mhm.
And I talk to him, and he knows what I bought in the past, what I returned, what I was searching for on the website, what is the things that I called for in the past, and so forth. So actually, he knows me as a client, and when he talks to me, he knows much more than a usual human being. You could sometimes get like a summary, but he knows everything that I've done. So when these call centers get a call, they usually don't really know all the history and the person and all that. But these kinds of solutions and generative AI could go and know all this information, and the interaction therefore could be really personalized in that sense.
Mhm.
And it could be a very good like a point to start the conversation, even if you're a bot and you're less trusted and people may be sometimes reluctant to talk to you, so forth.
Yep, exactly. No, I think so too. Yeah, the concept of like, yeah, summarization and knowing somebody before you engage with them and then summarizing it after you engage with them also for the next interaction, I think is important too. Yeah, you have to have the um yes, somebody knowing you, like you said, really well for any engagement, whether it's a bot, whether it's a human, passing bot back to human, whether it's passing human to human. Like we see these things too, where you're passing from one human, like, let me transfer you, and then you have to say it all over again to the human.
Oh, I hate
Right?
when
I
they
know
do
that's like
that.
torture for anybody. Or when you've already said it to the bot and then the bot doesn't pass it to the, yeah. So all of those things, like
Mm.
contextual passing of information is important. But we do that today. But I think Gen AI could even enhance that more because you get just more dense summarization and just more summarization across way, way back past experiences, right? You could just
Yeah,
summarize from the back of time potentially if you wanted to. So yeah, having that summarization is going to be really impactful to, like you said, really knowing what this person went through. Did they have somebody, call them 10 times last week and then we're calling them again? Are they going to be frustrated because we already called them 10 times? You know,
yeah,
even picking up emotional sentiment, putting emotional sentiment back into the,
right.
the summarization. So all of that I think would make for a much more
Yeah.
solid, rich experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and even more than that, if you could understand the personality of a person, like
Yeah,
there are some people who say like it's very short sentences. Some people are very like emotional, some people are very professional, and some people are too angry, whatever. So you could match the right salesperson to them,
that's
right?
true. Yeah,
That would talk in the same tone, or if they're angry, will make them more relaxed. It doesn't have to be the same tone. The matching tone. That's the
exactly.
right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could understand it, match it, cater to it. Yeah, and then that even like it becomes, yeah, to the matching of the person, and the bot could even cater. If you're talking with the bot could cater. Answer it this way if you're this persona. Answer it this way if you're
Yeah.
this persona. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's the same like when salespeople that really meet people and go and do real sales. They always say that it's like good to start a conversation with I know a sports team that both of you like or something like that. So I guess that sometimes you do know about that when, especially if it's a returning customer and you have some kind of a relationship with it. So I guess that it's something that you could integrate into the conversation kind of easily, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And it's funny, yeah, because like you said, some people, especially when dealing with bots, we've noticed really like small talk, or just they'll chat a lot. They'll be very chatty. And then some people are, know it's a bot and just say, I don't like, there's no point of me having any kind of discourse with you. Just give me
Yeah,
the answer. So you can kind of, yeah, cater it based on that. Like for a sports team, for example, I could see, yeah, understanding what sports team and then it could drop that in the conversation depending, and then just say, no, this person does not want to talk to me about that. So I won't. Or like you said,
yeah,
when they're passing it to an agent, then they can collect some information from past conversations. And yeah. So yeah, lots of persona detection and likes, personality, things like that, I think could be totally helpful. And again,
yeah,
depending on whether to use it or not. So that's the trick. But again, I
yeah.
see that in, yeah, Asian conversations today. They're like, how are you? How's your day? And then sometimes I'm like, I know this is I don't really want to, I don't, that's really nice
Yeah,
you're asking that, but I don't really
yeah.
want to know.
I'm not talking to you about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so it'd be great if a bot could kind of pick that up and then pass that to an agent. That would be really cool. So yeah, I totally see all of that. That'd be really neat.
Yeah. So we're almost done. I have my last questions.
Yeah.
Could you share some examples of successful use case for conversational AI?
Yeah. So yeah. So we've had, a number over the past years, and yeah, we at our company we deal more with a lot of enterprise level companies. So dealing with, they have like call centers. They're looking a lot of times to alleviate the call center volume, um, uh, primarily, and then obviously things like CSAT and things like that too. So those are our metrics. We look at containment, but we also look at CSAT, we look at resolution. So those are kind of what we see as like really top drivers and what we're trying, whatever technology we're employing, manual, Gen AI, anything like that, we're really driving to help cost savings in these companies with a good experience. That's kind of our balance. Sometimes it's also generating new sales as well too. So, but yeah, one of the more recent ones I would say that we just deployed that was really exciting was a retail store that's sporting goods essentially. So sporting goods store across the U.S. I think maybe mostly in the U.S. I think. And they deployed a bot just before Christmas, and they're looking at a whole omni-channel suite that they're going to be deploying. So they're going to be deploying digital, they're going to be deploying voice, async channels. So the first phase was deploying their digital bot before Christmas, and it was we were kind of anticipating, maybe a 20% containment, just generally based on what we've seen in the past. Maybe, we'll have to look at the resolution scores and CSAT. And generally, it was a really, really impactful launch. It launched, great engagement. It also had a 50% containment out of the gate,
Wow.
meaning, we saved 50% of the, in this case, chat. They didn't have chat. So this was, or I should say, people coming into the bot did not escalate then to a chat agent.
Hmm.
Was containment. And then the resolution was really high too. I think it was like, I can't remember, like 30-40%, something like that resolution. So meaning of all the people came in and anything that they said, we were able to resolve 40% of that. So yeah, it was just a really, really, just with the very little optimization out of the gate, we were able to really hit something that they didn't have any containment before we launched. So yeah,
Hmm.
it was just really successful. And yeah,
So why do you think it was more successful than others? What is the difference?
yeah. So a couple things. So one, they didn't have any bot before. So it might have been because people were they only had phone. They didn't have
Hmm.
chat or anything like that. So I think it was a case of, or so they did have chat, but they didn't have any automation before. So it was more of a case of I think people just really wanted automation. There's lots of easy ways to handle some of these things that maybe they didn't need a chat or didn't need a call. So there was that. And then on top of that, I think we just did really, there wasn't a lot of data from this company that they were able to provide, but we had data from past examples too. So we're able to see the intents and exactly what people would be asking, things like order status and things like that that we know, but a couple of things we didn't know. So the intents we might have hit right on the target right at the launch. And then again, we can add intents afterwards, but just that initial intent list might have been really spot on. Yeah, I think again, just back to the experience of, just how we handle things and just know, this is how we handle an order status intent. This is how we handle a return intent, just things that we know have worked in the past. We just kind of
Hmm.
deployed those, and yeah, it was able to really work. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's excited. It was only going to get better, but yeah, it's a really good launch to start. So yeah, that was
yeah,
just one of
for
our
sure.
recent launches. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So where could people hear more about your work and contact you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, so I'd love for everybody to reach me out there. Yeah, I probably use that most heavily. So I think it's just my linkedin.com/ my first and last name, I think is my profile. So yeah, look me
Yeah,
up there, and I'd love to connect with you and yeah, hear more
sure.
about if anyone has any questions. We are actually also hiring right now in our
Mm,
Bangalore location for a new conversation designer.
wow.
So yeah, with the implementation specialization. So yeah, if anybody's interested or wants to look at that role, happy to talk with you as well. So yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So, Celine, first, I really want to thank you. It's been very fun talking to you. I really enjoyed
Wow.
that, and
Yeah,
thank you.
interesting.
And I don't know where we met, but we met in the past in one of the events, and then we said that we should talk, and now we're
I
doing
know,
it.
it was
So,
like a year or 2 ago, and I remember that, and then just life got away, but I'm so glad we got a chance to talk.
yeah,
Yeah,
me
lots of
too.
cool things happening, and yeah, I love what you're doing
Sure.
too. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm so happy that we got this opportunity to just speak, and it was really interesting. So
Yeah.
thank you for that,
You as
Celine.
well. Yeah. Great.
Thanks. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And if you found this episode valuable and insightful, you're invited to share it. And I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.